She tried to get him kicked off the plane until he pulled out something that changed everything. The morning sun was breaking through the clouds at Denver International Airport when Marcus Washington stepped through the terminal doors. It was 6:47 a.m. and the place was buzzing with the usual chaos. People dragging suitcases that looked twice their size, parents chasing after kids who clearly didn't want to be there, and business travelers clutching their coffee like it was liquid gold. Marcus stood out in the crowd without trying to. He was in his early 40s, well-built, with that kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of knowing exactly what you're doing. His beard was perfectly trimmed, and he moved through the terminal like he owned the place. Not arrogant, just sure of himself. He walked up to the gate and handed over his boarding pass. The agent looked up with a friendly smile. "Good morning, Mr. Washington. Gate 23B, you're all set to go." "Thanks," Marcus replied with a quick nod, then headed toward the plane. He wasn't rushing like everyone else. Instead, he was watching. 3 college kids taking pictures by the big windows, an elderly couple bickering about whether they'd turned off the stove, and a woman in a bright yellow sweater talking frantically on her phone. Marcus noticed everything. It wasn't because he was paranoid, it was just who he was. After 15 years as a federal agent, you don't just turn that switch off. But today was supposed to be different. He'd just finished wrapping up a major case in Colorado Springs. Nothing flashy, just solid police work that would never make the news, but probably saved a lot of people from getting hurt. Now he was finally heading home to catch his breath. He found his seat, 12A, right by the window, and settled in. Perfect spot. Plenty of room for his laptop bag. He pulled out his headphones and was just starting to relax when someone cleared their throat next to him. "Excuse me, I think you might be in my seat." Marcus looked up to see a white woman in her 50s standing in the aisle. She had strawberry blonde hair and was holding onto her purse like her life depended on it. She looked nervous, maybe even a little scared. Marcus checked his boarding pass and showed it to her. "No, ma'am, I've got 12A, the window seat." She glanced at her ticket and her face went red. "Oh, I'm 12B." She squeezed past him and sat down in the middle seat, but something felt off about the whole thing. Marcus turned back toward the window and tried to get comfortable, but he could feel the tension building. The woman next to him was sitting stiff as a board, gripping her purse with white knuckles. Every few seconds she'd steal a glance at him, then quickly look away. He'd been through this before, in restaurants, at the courthouse, even at the grocery store. Usually he just let it roll off his back. Today, though, something felt different. The pilot's voice came over the speakers, welcoming everyone aboard and giving them the rundown about their flight to Chicago. As the flight attendants started going through their safety routine, Marcus noticed his seatmate's hands were actually shaking as she buckled her seatbelt. She kept looking around the plane, toward the back, then up front toward the cockpit. At first, he thought maybe she was just afraid of flying, but then she did something that made his blood run cold. She reached up and pressed the call button. A young flight attendant came over, leaning down with a professional smile. "What can I help you with today?" The woman lowered her voice to barely a whisper. "I don't want to cause any trouble, but..." She paused, glancing sideways at Marcus. "I don't feel safe sitting here. This man has been acting really strange." Marcus felt his stomach drop, but he kept staring out the window like he hadn't heard a word. Inside, though, his heart was racing. The flight attendant looked confused. "Has he done something to bother you?" "Well, no, not exactly," the woman said, "but something just doesn't feel right. I'm a mother. I know when something's wrong." The flight attendant looked uncomfortable and walked away to find her supervisor. The woman nodded, pressing her lips together like she'd won some kind of victory. Marcus finally turned and looked directly at her. His voice was calm but firm. "You need to be real careful about what you're suggesting here." The woman jumped like she'd been shocked. I'm not suggesting anything bad. I just want to feel safe on this flight." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. But then the flight attendant came back with backup, and that's when things got really messy. The woman walking toward them had "boss" written all over her. She was probably in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes that said she'd seen every kind of airplane drama you could imagine. Her name tag read Sandra. "Good morning," she said, keeping her voice professional. "I heard there's some kind of issue back here." The woman in 12B lit up like Christmas morning. "Yes, thank you for coming. I just don't feel comfortable in my seat. I know it's last minute, but maybe you could find me somewhere else to sit? For safety reasons?" Sandra had clearly heard the song before. Her eyes narrowed just a bit. Is there something wrong with your actual seat? No, the woman admitted, dropping her voice. It's not the seat, it's him. She nodded toward Marcus. I think he might be hiding something dangerous. Sandra turned to look at Marcus. He was still sitting there, calm as could be, but when their eyes met, there was something steel-hard in his gaze. Not angry exactly, more like he already knew how this whole thing was going to play out and was just waiting for everyone else to figure it out. Sandra took a deep breath. Sir, could I see your boarding pass real quick? Marcus didn't even blink. Sure thing. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his ticket, and handed it over. She looked it over. Seat 12A, everything looks good. The woman in 12B crossed her arms. I never said there was a problem with his ticket. I'm saying we should be careful about who we're letting on planes these days. You never know who might slip through security. She gestured at Marcus like he wasn't sitting right there. He hasn't said one word to me this whole time. Not one. That's not normal. Being quiet isn't against the law, Marcus said dryly. I didn't say it was, the woman snapped back, getting flustered. Sandra was losing her patience. Ma'am, I need something specific before I can move anyone around, especially in premium seating. Has this passenger actually done anything to threaten you? Now people were really starting to stare. A kid, a few rows back, had pulled out his earbuds. A businesswoman across the aisle was leaning forward, trying to catch every word. Well, no, the woman admitted, but he's got this briefcase under his seat. And when I asked him to move it, he got all cold and weird about it. And he won't tell me what's inside. You can't tell me that's not suspicious. Sandra looked at Marcus. What's in the briefcase, sir? Work stuff, Marcus said simply. Confidential documents. Mind if I take a quick peek inside? Marcus held her gaze steady. Are you TSA? Sandra hesitated. No, sir. I'm just flight crew trying to make sure everyone's comfortable. Marcus nodded slowly. Then no, you can't look inside. The woman threw up her hands. See? There. He's definitely hiding something. I knew something was wrong. A guy from the row in front turned around. Lady, you asked the man to move his bag. Now you're accusing him of… What exactly? I'm not accusing anybody of anything, she shot back. I just want to be safe up here. You're just making assumptions based on absolutely nothing, the man replied. The woman's face went red. Fine. I want to talk to the captain, right now. If something happens during this flight and I didn't speak up, I'd never forgive myself. Marcus shifted in his seat and spoke up again. Is there an air marshal on this plane? Because this is getting out of hand over nothing. Sandra looked torn between wanting to handle it herself and knowing this was bigger than she could deal with. I'll call ground control, she said finally. The captain needs to know what's happening. We're still at the gate. She disappeared toward the front of the plane. The woman leaned back with her arms crossed, looking satisfied. Some people get real defensive when you ask simple questions, she muttered under her breath. Marcus turned away and clenched his jaw. He didn't want to say another word, not until someone with real authority showed up. But what this woman didn't know, what nobody on that plane knew yet, was about to change everything. It took about 5 minutes. Word had got to the captain, and now there was a uniformed airline supervisor walking down the aisle. His badge said R. Martinez, big guy with gray hair and a clipboard, walking like he really didn't want to be dealing with this, but was going to handle it fast. Right behind him was a Phoenix police officer. Not TSA, not federal, just local cops. Standard procedure when passengers start causing problems before takeoff. The supervisor stopped at row 12 and looked around. Who called this in? He asked flatly. The woman in 12B raised her hand way too eagerly. I did. Look, I didn't want to make a big deal out of this, but I really don't feel safe. I'm not saying he did anything wrong, but he's acting strange and being super secretive about what he's carrying. Marcus didn't move a muscle. He just sat there with his hands in his lap, waiting. Martinez turned to Marcus. Sir, we're going to need you to step off the plane so we can have a quick chat with you. Am I being kicked off? Marcus asked. Just need you to come talk to security for a few minutes. Won't take long. By now, everyone on the plane was watching. People 5 rows up were craning their necks to see what was happening. Marcus kept his voice steady. What's the reason? We got a report about suspicious behavior. Marcus took a slow, deep breath. Then he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a black leather wallet. He flipped it open with one smooth motion. The gold badge caught the light. The blue seal was crystal clear. Federal Bureau of Investigation. He held it up so the officer could see it clearly. Marcus D. Washington, Senior Special Agent, Financial Crimes Division. You could have heard a pin drop. He snapped the wallet shut and looked straight at Martinez. I just finished a classified operation in Colorado Springs. I got on this plane quietly, minded my own business, and haven't done a single thing to cause any problems. So before you take this any further, maybe you want to call TSA and verify who I am. Or you can contact the Bureau directly. Your choice. The police officer looked at Martinez. Martinez just stood there, speechless. The woman next to Marcus? She looked like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't know, she stammered. You never said who you were. I don't have to, Marcus replied, calm but firm. Not unless I'm working a case, which I'm not. I was just trying to get home. Sandra came hurrying back from the cockpit. Captain wants to know, should we hold the flight? No, Martinez said quickly, rubbing his forehead. Let's verify this and move on. Marcus looked at the police officer. You got a radio? The officer, clearly realizing he'd stepped in at big time, nodded. Yes, sir. Give me just a minute. He walked toward the front of the plane to make the call. The woman in 12B opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. People started whispering. Someone in the back actually chuckled and said, she picked the wrong guy to mess with. Marcus sat quietly, his badge tucked back in his jacket. He didn't smile, didn't look smug. His expression said everything he didn't need to say. You brought this on yourself, but even though the badge was out, the damage was already done. And that was about to become crystal clear. The officer came back a few minutes later, and his whole attitude had changed. Agent Washington, he said quietly, looking embarrassed, you're all verified. We've also been asked to thank you for your service and let you get back to your trip. Marcus didn't nod, didn't thank him back. He just looked down, tightened his seatbelt, and turned back toward the window. The officer leaned over to Martinez. You need anything else from him? Martinez shook his head. Nope, we're done here. They both walked back up the aisle, probably wishing they could disappear. Sandra gave Marcus a quick look, somewhere between sorry and embarrassed, but didn't say anything. Instead, she turned to the woman in 12B. You still want me to move your seat? The woman didn't answer. She was gripping her purse so tight her knuckles had gone white. She just stared at the floor. Sandra waited another second. All right then. And she headed back to the front. The silence around row 12 was thick. People were still pretending not to stare, but everyone was listening. That awkward kind of attention where you can feel eyes on you even when no one's looking directly. Marcus took off his headphones and set them in his lap. He wasn't angry, at least not outwardly, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from dealing with the same garbage over and over again. Trayvon, the college kid across the aisle, leaned over. Man, I'm really sorry you had to go through that, he said quietly. Marcus glanced at him. It's nothing new, just louder than usual today. Trayvon shook his head. Still messed up how fast they jumped to conclusions. If you were wearing a hoodie like me, they probably would have brought 3 cops. Marcus gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Or if I'd raised my voice or moved the wrong way or looked at them sideways. The woman next to him finally spoke up. I didn't mean to offend you. Marcus didn't turn to look at her. You didn't offend me. She seemed relieved until he added, you profiled me. She froze. You looked at a black man sitting quietly with a briefcase and decided I was dangerous. Not because of anything I said or did, because I didn't say or do anything. You filled in the blanks based on what you saw. I just felt uncomfortable, she said weakly. Your comfort isn't a reason to treat someone like a criminal, Marcus said, his voice getting sharper. Your feelings aren't facts, and being scared doesn't give you the right to put someone through that kind of humiliation in public. There was a pause, then she said, I'm a mother. So am I, came a voice from behind them. Everyone turned slightly. It was a woman in row 15D, early 30s, Latina, holding a baby. She'd been quiet until now, but something in her tone made people turn around. I've got a kid in my lap and a diaper bag under my seat, she said. You didn't ask me what was in my bag. Why? Because I don't look suspicious? The woman in 14B blinked, stunned. The mom continued, voice calm but firm. You didn't just ask for a seat change. You made a silent accusation. And now we're all 30 minutes late because you couldn't sit beside a black man without convincing yourself he was a threat. The woman in 14B didn't speak again. Neither did most of the row. But while the seatbelt sign lit up and the engines roared to life, the real shift was happening in her face. Like maybe, just maybe, the message was finally landing. Takeoff came and went with the usual tilt and rumble. Emery sat motionless, eyes closed, the drone of the engines now doing what the headphones couldn't, quieting the noise inside his head. Not the plane, not the woman next to him, the noise that always came after moments like this. He knew how it looked. A composed black man with credentials, a clean resolution, a moment of public correction. But it wasn't victory, not to him. This kind of moment didn't go away when the wheels left the ground. The woman in 14B hadn't said another word. Her body had curled slightly inward, like she wanted to fold into herself and disappear. For all her earlier confidence, now she looked small, alone, still clinging to that tote, like it was going to save her from something. Trayvon had gone back to his music, but he kept glancing over with a look that said, "I see you, man." Quiet solidarity, respect, even. 35 minutes into the flight, the silence was broken. "Agent Tillman?" Emery opened his eyes. The flight attendant, Callie, was back. She held a folded piece of paper in one hand and a cup of water in the other. "Captain wanted to make sure you were okay," she said, "and he said to give you this." Emery took the paper. It was handwritten. "We're sorry this happened on our aircraft. It shouldn't have. Thank you for your professionalism. Welcome aboard, Captain Joe Tanner." He didn't smile, but he did nod. "Appreciate it," he said. Callie gave a small nod in return. Then she looked past him to 14B and hesitated. "Is there anything else you need?" she asked politely, but not to the woman. Emery shook his head. "No, I'm good." Callie moved on. A few rows back, whispers started again. Someone said something about lawsuits. Another person muttered, "Public embarrassment." Emery didn't care. He didn't want anything from her. Not compensation, not an apology, not even understanding. But then, something unexpected happened. The woman spoke again. Quiet, careful, no longer defensive. "I didn't know you were FBI." He looked at her finally. "You shouldn't have to." She stared at him for a second. "I guess I just got scared, that's all." He nodded slowly. "And when you're scared, who do you think is the threat?" She opened her mouth, closed it again. "I'm not trying to make you feel worse than you already do," he added. "But this wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. You had a moment where you could have looked at me like a person, and you didn't. I've never done anything like this before. That doesn't mean it wasn't wrong." He let the silence sit between them. Not as punishment, just truth. "You know," she said finally, "people talk about this stuff on the news, and I always thought that can't really happen like that. But I guess it does." He gave a soft shrug. "Now you know." There was no anger in his voice, no sharpness, just honesty. She turned slightly in her seat, not enough to make eye contact, but enough to show she'd stopped avoiding the conversation. "I'm sorry," she said very quietly. "Not because you're FBI, but because I see it now." Emery didn't answer. He just looked out the window again. Sometimes, silence is the only reply that matters. But the moment didn't end in that seat. It followed them down the aisle and all the way to the gate. Touchdown in St. Louis came with the usual bump and screech. As the plane rolled toward the gate, seat belts clicked open before the light even turned off. Overhead bins popped. Passengers began their standing shuffle. Everyone stretching, checking their phones, pretending the last 2 hours hadn't been heavy. Emery stayed seated. He always did. He waited until the aisle cleared a little before he stood, grabbed his briefcase, and stepped into the slow procession toward the front. When he got to the exit row, Callie was waiting. "Hope the rest of your day's better than this flight," she said quietly. He gave her a nod. "Appreciate your professionalism." Just behind him, the woman from 14B stepped off too. Her name, he'd overheard, was Rhonda Blake. It had come up when she gave it to the supervisor. She hadn't said much since her apology, but her eyes had changed, less icy, less tight. Outside the jet bridge, families waited with signs and hugs. Businessmen checked watches. A little girl clutched a stuffed rabbit and scanned the crowd for a familiar face. The airport kept moving like nothing had happened. But Rebecca didn't leave. She waited near the gate, shifting nervously on her feet, watching Marcus. He passed by her once, then again, before stopping. "You're not meeting anyone, Toro," he observed. "No," she said quietly. "I couldn't just walk away from this." Marcus turned around completely, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. She chose her words carefully now, like each one carried weight. "I've been sitting there thinking the entire flight. I figured saying sorry would make it right, but it doesn't, not really." Marcus stayed silent, waiting. She glanced around, then spoke softer. "The honest truth is, the moment I sat down beside you, I felt uneasy. Before you spoke, before you did anything, and that had nothing to do with you. That was all on me." Now she had his full attention. Her voice shook slightly as she continued, "I never saw myself as someone with those kinds of prejudices. But I didn't have to use slurs to act on my bias. I didn't have to scream or make a scene. I just had to think the worst of you. And that's exactly what I did. Travelers hurried past them, focused on their own journeys. But her eyes remained fixed on his. I've got two grown children that I tried to raise with good values. Then I went and behaved like this. In public, in front of everyone, in front of you. And I didn't even see how easily I could treat a stranger like a criminal. You claimed you felt threatened, and Marcus responded. But what you really wanted was power. You weren't scared of my actions. You were scared of what I might do based on absolutely nothing. She nodded slowly. I earned that humiliation. Maybe I needed it to wake up. Marcus watched her face carefully, looking for any hint of an act. He found none. And I want to change, she said, if that counts for anything. Marcus finally spoke again. Then have those conversations with people who look like you. Challenge them. Speak up when you witness it. That's how real change happens. She breathed out like this was a new concept. Then she offered her hand. Marcus looked at it, then met her eyes. He shook it once, firmly, briefly. No drama, no spectacle, just a human moment. Then he walked toward the escalators and vanished into the crowd. But the true impact of that exchange wouldn't be visible at the gate. It would show up the next time someone like Rebecca chose to act instead of staying silent. When Marcus finally made it to the pickup area, the Chicago morning sun was blazing, burning through all the tension from what had just happened. He put down his bag, adjusted his shirt, and pulled out his phone. His wife had texted, "Call when you get there. The kids are excited to hear from you." He smiled genuinely this time. Not the careful, professional expression he used when people were watching. A real smile. The kind that reminds you what matters most after you've weathered a storm. Around him, the airport chaos continued. Horns blaring, families embracing, people racing to baggage claim. Nobody knew about the drama on Flight 847. Nobody could feel the heaviness still lingering in the air. But Marcus could. He wasn't furious anymore. He'd grown accustomed to these situations over the years. Far too accustomed. But what stayed with him wasn't the false accusation or the delayed departure or even showing his credentials. It was the expression on Rebecca Collins's face when reality finally hit her, when she truly saw herself for the first time. That had meaning, because when you're raised in a society that instills fear through media coverage, educational materials, and quiet family discussions, overcoming it requires more than attending a workshop. It demands looking inward and facing the uncomfortable truths you've absorbed without realizing it. Most people never reach that point, but Rebecca had begun that journey. Perhaps that was progress. A dark sedan approached and Marcus got in, setting his bag beside him. "Heading to Oak Park?" the driver asked. "That's right," Marcus confirmed. "Thanks." They merged into city traffic, becoming part of the flow. The incident was already starting to fade. But before it disappeared entirely, one familiar thought returned, the same one that always surfaced after experiences like this. What if I wasn't a federal agent? No badge, no government authority, no credentials to command respect? What then? Would she have succeeded? Would they have trusted her word? Would that plane have departed without me? The reality is a badge shouldn't be what protects someone from another person's fears. A man's worth shouldn't depend on official status. His right to be somewhere shouldn't need validation. He was simply trying to get home. That should have been sufficient.